For today's meeting, I was asked to prepare a short introduction to the workflow I employ for annotating audiovisual material. So this is what this talk is about. First of all, I'd like to note that a recording of this talk will be made available shortly after its live presentation, both on Zenodo at the DOI given, as well as on YouTube via the QR code on screen. It should be noted that the task of translating and transcribing audiovisual material exists for me, and probably for the majority of us, within a larger program of data collection, a program which may range from elicitation of morphosyntactic paradigms or word lists or questionnaires, up to more extensive documentation of the linguistic arts of a given speech community. Whether collecting data associated with a well-circumscribed research question within an experimental paradigm, or whether approaching work from a more exploratory paradigm like language documentation, the general workflow shown on screen captures some of the larger steps involved. While keeping this larger context in mind, today we'll focus on the transcription and translation part. So if you look at my transcription and translation practice, it can be represented in the flowchart on screen. Essentially, this represents a series of steps here in red boxes, each of which takes place within one of two pieces of software, Elan or Flex, indicated here in colored circles, with each step requiring its own inputs, here represented within the red circles, and leading to a series of outputs, circled in red here. In its most broad conception, the workflow takes audiovisual material, such as the recording on screen, for example, and produces an annotation of this audiovisual material in the form of an Elan annotation file with the file name .eaf. The reason we target this particular output is because it is very rich. As can be seen here, this process results in each of the major elements of a classic four-line interlinearization. Here we see the orthographic representation of a given utterance, as well as its morphological pars, as well as its gloss, as well as a free translation. This material can then be exported to a number of different formats, the example on screen being a draft of a fully interlinearized story, with the utterance we had been looking at in Elan annotation file highlighted here. In addition to this, the textual information is temporally linked to the recording, therefore meaning that the analyzed utterance can be read as well as listened to, and, of course, examined visually if a video recording exists. In a step-by-step manner, then, the work flows as follows. The audio and video files are combined with a template file in the form .etf to create a new Elan annotation file, which would look a bit like what we see in the upper right-hand corner on screen. As a note, a template file similar to the one I use can be found on the Endangered Languages Archive by following the QR code on screen. Next, with the tiers configured and any separate audio and video files having been aligned in Elan, the material may now be transcribed, that is, rendered into a conventionalized written form and then translated. For the purposes of this project, this will most commonly be Swahili or English. An example of an Elan annotation file with transcriptions and translations is given in the upper right-hand corner of this slide. The Endangered Languages Archive has some good resources on these particular steps, which can be accessed, again, via the QR code on screen. Then, this transcribed and translated file is rendered into a special kind of XML file called .flextext. This file can be read by both Elan and Flex, and it is this export format which allows the two programs to talk to each other. That is, it allows the Elan transcription and translation to be imported into Flex for further analysis. The next step is then to take this newly created .flextext file and import it into the Fieldworks Language Explorer program, known as Flex for short. A newly imported file looks something like what is shown in the upper right-hand corner of this slide. Parsing and glossing then comes next, with the results of a round of parsing and glossing in Flex looking like what is shown in the upper right-hand corner. Some good resources on using Flex in this configuration are available by the QR code on screen, and again are developed by the Endangered Languages Archive. Additionally, all of the steps involved in getting materials from Elan and into Flex, and then from Flex back into Elan, are well laid out in a series of ELAR training resources, again available via the QR code on screen. And following import from Flex back into Elan, this then brings us once again to the final target output, that rich time-aligned annotation of the audiovisual material. Finally, I would like to make a couple of notes on common modifications or extensions to this workflow. So first, it should be noted that because each of these steps is more or less discrete, different work can be delegated to different people. For example, in my case, virtually all of the initial transcription and translation is done by local researchers, that is, members of the speech community who have been trained in broad aspects of language documentation, including rendering their languages in a working orthography and translating from their language into Swahili. I then take these transcriptions and translations, archive the originals, and then provide slightly cleaned up versions that then proceed through the workflow. Flex also features a collaborative system in which multiple contributors can work on a single project, so parsing and glossing materials with other linguists is also possible. And obviously, different outputs from this workflow can be fed into other tools and form parts of new workflows, such as the creation of subtitled video from subtitle files .srt exported from Elan, for example. I think that this is probably enough for today, but I encourage everyone to follow the links provided, explore this workflow for themselves, as well as adapt it to their own needs and circumstances. Thank you.